We are live with yet another edition of the Letter Winners podcast. I am Eric Froton with NBC Sports Edge here with my co-host Mike Bainbridge of the CFF site. Mike, we had a pretty good week last week, at least on the prize picks front. I mean, we went 4-0 on the prize picks, 6-3 overall. I think we went 1-2 on the sides, but we continue to be pretty well on the props front on all fronts. Of course, we tend to put in our 4-5 player parlays. Go 4-5-1 and miss the big paydays by one player. It seems like that's our MO each week. So hopefully this week will be a little bit better. I know we got some pretty good stuff on tap here. We'll dive into the late injury news. Zander Horvath, game time decision for Purdue. That is a welcome sight since King Doru has been up and down, to say the least. A little here, a little there. Mostly down. He did score 14.5 points that one week that I recommended him when he was extremely cheap. So I'll take that as a pseudo win. Not exactly a ringing endorsement, but good to see that Zander is at least able to return from that injury. I think it was a broken leg to some extent. I don't know how a broken leg heals in 4 weeks, but he's apparently Superman. So that's good to see there for Mr. Horvath. We'll be on the keep our eyes out for that. Jaxson Dart, ready to go, according to Dante Williams, the fill-in head coach over there. Very interesting because we haven't seen Kedon Slovis smother himself in glory in his stead. And when he came in relief of Slovis, he looked very, very good. In recent weeks, I've seen him when he's been practicing having a pretty big knee brace on that right knee. But the fact that he's ready to go is certainly something interesting for this week, and not good news for any Kedon Slovis stands out there. And lastly, Jordan Addison and Israel Abanikanda, both game time decisions. Seems like the game time decisions theme is prevalent this week, probably even more so than in recent weeks. So any thoughts on those three news items, Michael?
Yeah, no interest in Purdue running backs any week for the most part. Zander Horvath is minimum priced this week for daily at $3K. So maybe if we get the information that he's full go, maybe you want to insert him in your lineup. My attention is with these Pitt injuries because we expect Pitt, regardless of who's out there, to score some points with Kenny Pickett, the now Heisman contender. We're looking, especially on DraftKings, we're looking for cheap bargains with our daily lineups. And if Abanikanda is out, they've already had another running back go to the transfer portal. So now we're down to 2 names here with Vincent Davis and Rodney Hammond. Hammond's averaging, I think, nearly 6 yards a carry in his brief time running the ball this year. I think he had a 3-touchdown performance somewhat recently. So somebody at 4,200, if Abanikanda is out, you're facing a Miami defense who is one of the worst tackling teams in the country. So that's kind of a cheaper play that I might like there. With regards to Addison, it sounds like he has a better chance to play. We'll see, obviously, in the next hour or so. But if he's out, I'm not sure who exactly is the primary beneficiary. Maybe it's Kenny Pickett spreads it out to his wealth of receivers. I think it might be Jared Wayne who gets some reps in the slot. I saw last week he got reps in the slot in place of Addison, so he might be the guy. Tazier Mack is obviously a name that people are familiar with. So one of those 2 guys would be the primary go-to guy if Addison is out.
Yeah, we saw last week after Addison went down, they actually lined up in a tight formation against Clemson with a linebacker taking Tazier Mack out of the slot, and he ended up burning him down just absolutely toasting him down the seam, wide open by at least 5 yards for a touch. That's certainly an interesting development there. And Kenny Pickett, I mean, I've been trying to keep in touch with what's going on in the NFL draft circles, and he's been listed as the QB1 in a couple of different prognosticators' new big boards. So, I mean, my gosh, a meteoric rise, not just Heisman. We're talking NFL draft.
Would you take him
in the first round? So, obviously, with the way that – I'm sorry?
Would you take him there?
What would I –
Kenny Pickett, QB1.
I take him QB1? No, not QB1. No. But I mean, that's me. That being said, I mean, it's obviously a very unsettled quarterback class. Just for him even to be in that conversation, you kind of see how it's changed from week one into where we're at now. So, I mean, it's indicative of college football. You just never know until we get into the season. Next slate of news, Siobhan Cordero and Day Hunter, both questionable game time decisions. Those are obviously very impactful situations since they're playing Utah State, a team that has been extremely passive when it comes to the defense. You want to pretty much start anybody you get a chance to there. Stetson Bennett has drawn the starting nod, according to Kirby Smart against Florida in the cocktail party today. He split first-team reps all week with JT Daniels in practice, but he's gotten the nod. That's definitely an important one since I liked the Stetson Bennett. I bet his under on the passing as soon as it came out at DraftKings, I was on that. It has since gone down from, I believe it was like 219.5. It's gone down. It's under 200 now. I'm not sure where it's actually settled in at this point, but that's something you want to be aware of. And probably at the new reduced passing yardage mark, you probably want to stay away from that, despite the fact that I do think that Daniels gets some reps here. And he's going to be under pressure, Bennett, because Florida does have a couple of good bookends that are definitely NFL caliber defensive ends. We saw him get run all over a couple of weeks ago by LSU, the highest yardage total of rushing that they've ever allowed in their entire team history. But in terms of their pass rush, it is pretty competent. And lastly for this slate, Kevin Marks has practiced all week. He will play, according to Maurice Linguist. But he was still listed conspicuously as second on the depth chart this week, in which that was behind Dylan McDuffie, who's been excellent in terms of getting 20 carries a game in his stead. Michael, any thoughts on those news bites?
Start with Marks, I guess. I mean, yeah, the depth chart kind of reflects it. Like, even when both him and McDuffie were on the field, both healthy earlier in the year, I thought McDuffie was the more productive back out of the two. And obviously in the past few weeks, he's without Marks. He's shown that he's a very good back, topped 100 yards rushing last week with a pair of touchdowns, I believe. They get a very good Bowling Green defenses, or a very poor Bowling Green defense this week. So I know I have McDuffie in a dynasty league. And I feel very confident of firing him up still, even with Marks back in play this week. At the very least, they'll split carries. So I, again, feel very confident starting McDuffie this week. Georgia, we spoke on this even yesterday regarding the Stetson Bennett under. We both hammered that when it came out. The 24/7 beat writer is confident, even though that it's been announced that Bennett will start. He seems confident still that JT Daniels is going to get playing time this week. I assume we'll see him. How much this week, I don't know, but I assume we'll see him against Florida. So, we both like that under there.
Yeah, it's similar to, as we talked about as well yesterday with the Texas Tech situation, with obviously Matt Wells getting fired this week, Sonny Cumbie taking over. College fantasy football legend, Sonny Cumbie, absolute top 10 all-time single season when it comes to fantasy points in 6 point per passing touchdown leagues, the only leagues I like to participate in. But yeah, so that's definitely something you want to watch out on both of those fronts. I have Dylan McDuffie as well, 50-teamer. The 20, not the 20-teamer. I have him in a couple of other dynasty-type formats, and I'll be rolling him out there. So I need a win in the 50-teamer this week. Come on, D-Mac. The next set of news, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, his hand was injured last week. It started out with a big wrap on it, has been throwing in practice. I think he's going to play, but we will have to take a look. They're playing a pretty tough Utah defense on the road, so that will be relevant. I'd have a hard time starting him in lineups based on this information. Michael Pratt for Tulane is in concussion protocol. He's hopeful to play, which, I mean, Tulane's going to need him because they get a tough matchup this week against Cincinnati. So good luck with that. And finally, Ulysses S. Bentley, the tale of great Ulysses, as Cream would say, or brave Ulysses, excuse me. I don't want to misquote Eric Clapton. He's a full go versus Houston today, allegedly, according to the early reports. And that report came out early. It came out on like Monday, where they were saying he's good to go. He played a snap or two last game where they're just kind of testing him out. So he did see the field, but it was obviously the Trey Siggers show there. I tend to like the Trey Siggers. I believe his under started out at 58.5 on DraftKings, down to 52.5 now. That 6 yards can be the difference between winning and losing, especially with there's still some uncertainty. It could be coach speak on the full go, but I tend to think Bentley will play. Michael, any thoughts on those news bites?
Yeah, no interest on Michael Pratt on any fronts, whether it's DFS or college fantasy. I think the only way that Michael Pratt affects things is it would be helpful if you're starting a Jerome Ford or a Desmond Ridder that you want Tulane to potentially put up some points just to keep those guys in the game. So we're hopeful that Michael Pratt starts if you're a Desmond Ridder or Jerome Ford owner. Ulysses Bentley, I'm not firing him up in any of my lineups unless I'm desperate. He's full go. They said he was close to full go last week, and as you mentioned, he saw just a couple of snaps. Really can't trust coach speak a ton until you see it on the field. Trey Siggers has been fairly impressive in Bentley's place. So I think at best this week, you're probably looking at a split between the two. So we both like the under on Trey Siggers this week, but in terms of college fantasy, I'm not starting either player.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll move on to our sides. I'm going to go with Boise State over Colorado State. Now, anybody who watched that Colorado State game last week knows that Steve Addazio is, I would say, bordering incompetent, but I believe he's crossed the threshold at this point where they actually gained a first down with under 20 seconds left, which stops the clock, gives them a new set of downs, had the ability to just run up to the line, spike the ball, and have 45 seconds to run up to the line and get the field goal kicker in to settle in. Plenty of time to get the field goal unit on and kick a field goal. No, they get the first down. They don't realize they got the first down. So they rush out the field goal team, even though there's no need to. All they had to do was go and spike the ball. With time ticking down, they snap it in haste. Field goal kicker is barely set. He shanks it left, and they end up losing to Utah State, which is, again, as we discussed, not a very good program at all. First year of Blake Anderson, very, very soft defense. This week with Boise State playing Colorado State, CSU is ranked 93rd in 247 Sports overall talent rating. Boise State is ranked 60th. What they do well is Boise State is obviously throw the ball, pretty well. Khalil Shakir, Hank Bachmeier, terrible rushing offense, but they're still defensively allowing under 2 points per drive. So I think with Boise State having a couple of quality wins, first off against BYU, their signature win, their losses have been tough. Oklahoma State, Nevada, Air Force, all good teams, all very close contests. And they beat Utah State, who obviously beat Colorado State last week, 27-3. I don't trust Steve Addazio in any format, especially in fantasy. And I'm going with Boise State there. Mike, any thoughts? Who you got there on your play for?
I like Oklahoma to bounce back this week and blow out Texas Tech. It's tough with the Texas Tech side just because you don't know how a team is necessarily going to react after a coaching firing. Are they down in the dumps or are they going to fight for the interim head coach, which, by all accounts, it seems like they really like Sonny Cumbie. So, and they still have a lot to play for. They're 5-3, right? They're 5-2, 5-3. So, they're right there on the verge of bowl eligibility. So they have a lot to play for, but I do like this bounce back spot for Oklahoma. I think they're much better, obviously, than what we saw last week against Kansas. Texas Tech grades poorly in almost every metric defensively. They can't stop the run. They're 74th in pass success rate, one of the worst tackling teams in the country. So I like Caleb Williams. Fire him up in your lineups. I think he's our fourth highest projected quarterback this week. Kennedy Brooks should have a good day. So again, I like the Oklahoma offense in a bounce back spot.
Yeah, Kennedy Brooks, sky high over under, I believe it's 95.5 yards, what it was. Just like, that's a big number. And obviously they're playing Texas Tech, but at the same time, he has to go for 100 yards in order to hit that. And even though he's been getting the lion's share of Eric Gray, that's still a pretty big commitment. I'm going to go with my second play, Maryland, -5 over Indiana. gosh, Indiana has seen just a precipitous drop from last year, 2020. A lot of that has to do with Michael Penix obviously being injured. He's listed as week to week. But last week, their backup, who, while not, sexy, he is a seasoned redshirt junior. He got hurt, Jack Tuttle. He's also week to week. I don't think either of these guys play. At least that certainly hasn't been how things are trending. And the two neophyte freshman quarterbacks who came in to back him up went a combined 4 for 10 for 39 yards passing. The first one, I forget his name off the top of my head, but he went 1 for 6. It was just a dreadful performance out of both of them. And considering that they're going to be playing a Maryland team who can score, I do think that it's going to be a problem for them at Maryland. Give me Maryland over Indiana. Anytime you're dealing with just quarterbacks, we have no idea what they're going to be. I'll lay the points and take.
Where's that game at? Do you know where that game's at?
I believe it's at Maryland, but I could be wrong about that.
If it's at Indiana, I would take the opposite side on that one.
Really? They're going to. Well, I know that Maryland's rush defense is not very good, so I assume we're going to see a steady diet of Stephen Carr. And they're not. I mean, like you said, we're not talking about two superstar teams or anything like that are great. But
no, I trust Tom Allen over Mike Locksley any day of the week.
Well, we'll see what they have with freshman signal callers. All right, no problem. Moving on to DraftKings DFS core 2 plays for myself. Will Shipley at $5,700, a pretty darn good value this week. As we saw last week, they said, okay, he's probably going to play coming in, and he came in and he took the overwhelming majority of snaps. Phil Maffa did get a red zone touchdown. We saw Kobe Pace basically shuttled out. That was a big play of mine. It was the play of the week last week, was Kobe Pace's under. They had been, I believe, like 65.5 yards. He didn't even get close to that. I think he was in the 30s. Barely touched the ball. It's the Will Shipley show over there at Clemson at $5,700. Very reasonable, mid to low priced running back that I feel like you can count on in a pretty good spot against Florida State, who, you want to talk about defensive metrics, just do not pass muster on anything pretty much when it comes. I believe the only thing they're really particularly good at is suppressing explosiveness, but like marginal efficiency, success rate, they're just getting crushed consistently. And then David Bell coming off a rare subpar week, under 10 points last week. I just think there's no way he goes 2 weeks in a row where he has under 40 yards receiving. He caught 6 passes, but they were all short passes last week at $7,100 in a slate where, as Mike and I kind of discussed as well, where playing the trick-or-treat wide receivers, we'll kind of use that reference as opposed to feast or famine, because it is Halloween weekend. Going with those sort of wide receivers, you don't know what you're getting down the board. I like the certainty of David Bell. We know he's going to get at least 10 targets, probably even closer to 15 in that spot. And I think that's a pretty good core play. Mike, your 2 core plays.
Yeah, if you didn't put those 2 guys on the sheet, I was going to. So we are in agreement. I am firing up both of those players in my lineups. I went 2 higher priced. I cheated here. 2 higher priced guys. Deuce Vaughn, we have a massive projection on him at over 26 fantasy points this week. TCU has allowed the second most fantasy points to opposing running backs in the country behind Missouri. They are on that level of terrible at defending the run. And say Deuce Vaughn doesn't get there on the run, somehow TCU magically can stop Vaughn on the ground. He's averaging between 5 and 7 targets a week. He's their leading receiver, I think, on the season. So he is guaranteed, I think, to get at least 20 points, if not more. Probably need 30 to pay off that salary, but I think it's easily attainable against this defense. Second one, Sam Hartman. He's a new quarterback this year, right? He looks tremendously better than last year. He's not turning the ball over. Higher completion percentage. Blew up last week against Army. Duke defense, not good in any metric. Second most fantasy points allowed this season in the country to opposing quarterbacks this year. I'm conflicted on whether or not you need to pair Hartman with a receiver. And initially my thing is no, right? Jaquari Roberson and A.T. Perry are the highest priced receivers in the slate this week.
Yep, 76 and 7,500. Yep.
Yeah, and there's no target hog, right? So he can spread it around between Roberson, between Perry. I know they were the primaries last week, but they still got Taylor Moore and they still got Donald Stewart. They got other guys they use in that receiving core. So I really do think Sam Hartman gets there, and you don't have to necessarily pair him with one of his receivers.
Yeah, understandable. Obviously, Deuce Vaughn has been just freaking electric, and he does everything. Catches passes, runs the ball. He's great. He is the next Darren Sproles is what we've heard him compared to. I think that's apt. Bargain bin for the main slate. All right. I know it's a gamble. I know it's Georgia's defense. There's a potential quarterback split. But at $5,900, if you feel like gambling, Anthony Richards, AR-15, so cheap, under $6,000 for a QB in this slate. Oh, I'm so tempted. I mean, in the super flex spot, it's cheap. He's 240 pounds. We've seen him run. He can throw out a structure. I just think that talent-wise, he's so good. Obviously, he's playing Georgia, but that's why he's in the bargain bin, and there's the conjecture. Is he going to start? Is Emory Jones? I don't think there's any way Dan Mullen at 4-3, trying to save his job, is going to start Emory Jones over Anthony Richardson. I don't understand how that happens. So based on the fact that I think he's starting, I'm going to go with 5,900. And Josh Wiley, Cincinnati, again, against Tulane. Tulane's defense has been absolutely brutal this season. They've been getting crushed on a regular basis. And Cincinnati can't be stopped. Wiley had 2 touchdowns last week. He had some injury issues and hadn't really been productive the past few weeks. Came out with a bang, 60 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think he catches one, gets in the end zone at $3,700, where you're typically in the trick or treat again range at that price tag. I'm going to go with Josh Wiley if you're looking for a low-priced shot down the line. Michael, your bargain bin for the main.
Yeah, just real quick on Anthony Richardson. I like what one of the Florida beat writers said, in that it doesn't matter who the starter is, it matters who finishes the game for the rest of the season, who takes the last snap. Even if Emory Jones starts, we know Anthony Richardson's going to play, and I would assume he gets the bulk of the playing time this week. And Florida had 2 weeks. They had the bye week last week, so they've had a good deal of time to prepare for this Georgia defense. So maybe they can throw some wrinkles and get a few touchdowns this week. So I'm with you. Anthony Richardson's just staring you right in the face to start him in the super flex this week. Where I'm spending down at, Aidan O'Connell, quarterback for Purdue. Jeff Brom confirmed this week that even though he had a poor performance against Wisconsin, Aidan O'Connell is still the starter. Threw for 300 yards in both games prior to last week. I'm not really sure what to make of this Purdue-Nebraska game, if I'm being completely honest. I can see it being 17-10, and I can see it being 35-30, right? These are 2 teams that just Jekyll and Hyde, you really don't know what to expect from their offenses, but we have to spend down somewhere. We know Purdue's going to throw the ball a ton because their running backs are basically worthless in that offense. Nebraska's 83rd in pass success rate. They're 6th average in the Big Ten in pass yards per game. So, I like Aidan O'Connell as a spend down option at quarterback. Next one, Keyshawn Smith. I know our rule, we're trying to avoid cheap wide receivers because they end up busting more than usual. But Smith has got, what has he got? He's just got 102 yards receiving in the last 2 weeks. But he's been targeted 19 times, okay? And so that's more than any receiver in the 3,700 range where he's priced at. So, he's worth a shot if he's getting that kind of volume.
Yeah, and with Mike Harley just being phased out, I think he only had 1 catch last game. He's just shuttled down the depth chart. It looks like Keyshawn Smith has been the recipient of those targets that were going to Harley before, right alongside Charleston Rambo. Core 2 plays for the evening. I'm going with C-Rod, Chris Rodriguez, Kentucky, $6,500. That mid-tier running backs that I've kind of been I'm going to try to use that this week where you know what you're getting out of them. Playing Mississippi State, you have to think they're going to be pounding the ball like they like to do. and want to keep that passing offense off the field, keep the pressure on the Mississippi State defense. I like Chris Rodriguez. And this is kind of an exciting thing. You don't get a lot of G5 teams that we see in these slates, but with a high-profile game, SMU versus Houston, Tanner Mordecai, a rare appearance on DraftKings. All right, $8,100. Let's go. Let's fire up Tanner Mordecai. I don't get to play him very much in DFS, so $8,100. I think he's like 5th or 6th QB on the slate. With a short slate, 8 games we have to work with. Give me some Tanner Mordecai. He's been a machine this season, and for the undefeated SMU team, high-profile game against Houston, I'm going with him. Mike, your core 2 plays.
I hope that hits for you because I got over 2.5 passing touchdowns for Mordecai this week. So hope that one hits. I'm rolling Tank Bigsby against Ole Miss. I like that game total at 66. That one stuck out to me. So I actually don't mind Tank Bigsby or, yes, Bo Nix. I don't mind either play this week if you want to fire him up. But I feel safe with Bigsby here. Had 3 100-yard games coming out of the gate this season. Then faced some tough defenses, and I think he got nicked up at some point because
he definitely did.
Yeah, his volume was down. I know they like the backup in Jarquez Hunter, but against Arkansas the last time out, he got 19 touches, found the end zone, had about 70-some yards rushing. So Ole Miss defense can't really stop the run this year. And if Tank was injured, again, another team with a bye week last week, so he had some time to heal up. So 5,700 is really cheap for a talent like Tank Bigsby. Other one, this is just lock it in. Every one of my lineups is Jaylen Warren against Kansas. Kansas, one of the worst rush defenses in the country. Jaylen Warren is getting 30 touches a game since taking over as the starter. I don't see how he doesn't get there at that price point. He's priced down for a marginal performance last week. So he's priced down at 7,400. You're never going to see him at that pricing again this year. So fire him up in every one of your lineups.
Yeah, good call. Absolutely. And Jarquez Hunter, I believe, was like 65.5 on his over-under on DraftKings. That's down into the mid to low 50s now. So it looks like that's Tank Bigsby. The bargain bin for the evening, I'm going with Chase Garbers, Cal. I know. Gosh, me and Mike are asking for it, going with a Cal player here. $6,100, so cheap. Eight-team slate. They're playing Oregon State, and while I love what Oregon State is doing offensively, they've proven that they will give up some points on defense. They are giving it up, but they're giving it as well. So at $6,100, Chase Garbers has quietly had, I believe, 5 of his last 6 games had over 20 points under the DraftKings scoring format. I mean, talk about consistency, cheap, in a good spot. Give me Chase Garbers. And lastly, Brennan Presley, Oklahoma State. As we talked about, you have Warren firing up. He's only $4,500 here. He's had touchdowns in 3 of the past 4 games. He had 2 touchdowns last game as the slot receiver there. Obviously, they go to Tate Martin on the outside when they want to go deep and stretch the field. But he's proven to be a pretty good red zone weapon, Presley. And he's done a good job in terms of, in space when you have those one-on-one matchups. He's pretty deadly beating up on those slot receivers, and sometimes he even gets a safety on him, and he's been cooking them in the red zone. So I'm going to go with those 2. Mike, your bargain bin.
Yeah, Cal's going to get shut out this week now that we're touting 2 players in TFS. I like Christopher Brooks at 4,100. I mean, again, we have to spend down somewhere to fit in these studs. He's seemingly taken over the starting backfield over Damian Moore. He's got 28 carries over the last 2 games. It's always going to be a split backfield, but at 4,100 against an Oregon State defense, I know they're second in the Pac-12 in rush defense this year, but they face Purdue, USC, and some FCS team at the start of the season. Neither of those teams run the ball. They've given up over 4 yards a carry the last 3 weeks, so they're not as good as that second spot ranking in the Pac-12 defending the run. So again, you're not going to get 100 yards out of Brooks, but if you can get 50 and a touchdown at 4,100, you'll take that every day. Second play, again, a bit risky. Kobe Hudson for Auburn. I mentioned we like the total at 66. He's averaging about 5 targets per game this season. His snap counts were way down in week 7 against Arkansas. I'm not sure why, but he's consistently been in that top 3 rotation at receiver. And you're just playing him because, it's a guy that sees consistent targets and we like the game total. So, you get 3 catches, 50 yards and a touchdown. You'll take it every day at 3,900.
Absolutely. And Chris Brooks looks like he's the established short yardage back and goal line back. He's like 230 pounds, so I don't see anything wrong with that. And Damian Moore has been getting phased out. On to our promo code for Prize Picks. BetSperts, BETSPERTS. Put that in, you get a $100 match on your initial investment into the Prize Picks realm, and it's been pretty darn good. Last week we went 4-0 on our Prize Picks plays, and this week, man, Jaden DeLora, Washington State. When are they going to appropriately price this guy? 227.5? Are you kidding me? 227.5 passing yards. He's crushed that the past 3 weeks. Crushed it. One time he isn't hitting that when he was hurt in the first game back. He's closer to 400 than he is to 200 at this point. I do not understand how they can keep pricing him there. That is an easy peasy over for me all day. And my other one is going to be the Rooster. Cock-a-doodle-doo, Jalen Knighton, Miami, 42.5 rushing yards. This is an explosive running back. Now, he's the type of guy where he could run in the line a few times, get 5 carries, 6 yards. And that 7th carry, he is going to bust it for 50 yards. Explosive runner. Pretty good matchup here for Miami. I think that's just incredibly low. I'm taking the over on 2 of those. I usually like to stay under if you can, but Price Picks just seems to price guys lower, and I think that's a pretty good shot. Mike, you have 2 Price Picks.
Yeah, we covered Will Shipley pretty extensively. I got him at 10.5 fantasy points earlier in the week on Prize Picks. He's up to 12 now. I still like it. We had him projected at 17 fantasy points this week, and that was before we got the Kobe Pace news that he's out. So I haven't checked it since, but I assume it's upwards close to 20 now. So that is an easy over for me. Second, Jashaun Corbin, sticking in that same game against this Clemson defense. In competitive contests this year, he split carries with Treshaun Ward. So, it's an unfavorable matchup against this Clemson defense. They're 3rd in the ACC against the run. You're splitting time with the backup, Treshaun Ward. I don't see how he gets to that 78.5 mark. We have him projected at 55 yards this week.
That's a pretty good value. Absolutely. I like Treshaun Ward a lot too. He's pretty electric. My DraftKings late lines, DraftKings moved so much yesterday. They had, as me and Mike talked about, they had Emory Jones at 198.5. Okay, they opened it up with. I don't know who's doing the DraftKings lines, but man, they've made some mistakes early on, and these have gotten bet down, obviously. But here's a couple of the late lines that I think are still worth value. Chris Olave at 70.5 receiving yards. I mean, it seems like in the games against Akron, games against the lower tier teams, they don't really break out Olave as much as they need to. Like, they kind of go to Jackson Smith-Njigba. Rucker gets some run. Travion Henderson, obviously, getting it out of the backfield. But when they play good teams, like, they're not going to take the pedal off the metal against Penn State here, especially with Sean Clifford extremely banged up, and he's one hit away from going out. I love him at 70.5. That's a real low line for Olave, considering he's probably going to get 8 to 10 targets. I can't see him not hitting that. And then Parker Washington, same game, 46.5 receiving yards. We saw Keandre Lambert-Smith really emerge in the past few weeks. He's turned out to be, obviously you have Jahan Dotson there who's going to command a ton of targets. But with Lambert-Smith really coming on too, we've seen Washington kind of shuttled down, less emphasis on a weekly basis on him at 46.5 receiving yards. As mentioned, Clifford banged up. If he goes out, Taquan Roberson also has been banged up. They could be down in their 3rd quarterback. That's bad news against an excellent Ohio State defense with their new defensive coordinators kind of shored up those problems that they had last year. They're not just giving up garbage time yards anymore, and that's kind of a problem for Parker Washington. So For myself, Eric Froton, NBC Sports Edge, Mike Bainbridge at the CFF site. We appreciate you listening. Check out the Discord server for any late breaking news over there on the CFF site. Excellent. I'm on it all the time. Real-time updates is where you go to get it. Thank you very much for listening to Letter Winners.